Right. Good evening, guys. I am anticipating that it might be slightly quieter this week, given the school holidays. Already it's looking a little thinner with us numbers wise today. So thank you for those of you who have come. I appreciate it, as always. How is everyone doing? How has everyone's weeks been? Has anyone done anything nice with their holidays so far that they want to share whilst we set up the Kahoot? You good? Good, just good, not great. Very good. I'd like to hear that. What's made the week very good? No school. Yeah, I get that. Completely understand. Very valid. Right. Oh, nice. We've got a few more people entering. So hopefully I'll give it a couple more minutes, then we'll make a start. Give people a chance to join our weekly Kahoot. Anyone else had a lovely week? I bet you've been enjoying your time off school already. Right. I'll give it one more minute. And as always, you can join in midway through, so don't worry, guys. Nice to see some more people. Good to see the regulars coming through. It's nice to see consistent people. Right, literally 30 more seconds. There's 10 people here, but only four people in my game. I'm guessing some people just aren't feeling like winning today. How was my week? My week was fine as always. Nothing special, to be honest. Just a lot of work. Yeah, not too interesting, to be honest with you. Right, okay, we're getting a few more people now. How many? We are five people down. We'll make a start because we do want to get on today. How's my week? Can we do a different mode? You ask me this every week, and I would absolutely love to do a different mode. But unfortunately, I only have the free version of Kahoot, which means I can only do the normal classic mode. I am thinking about trying to vary it with other kinds of games. So if you have any suggestions for other kinds of games that aren't Kahoot that we can do collectively, then please, I'm all ears. I'm open to suggestions. If anyone has any that they've used at school or they know of, would be very helpful. Um, Ooh, could people saying Blocket? I've never heard of that. Let me write that down. What is that one? Is that one what do you do for that? Cool. Written down, noted. Okay, right, we'll make a start then. Few people entering still. As always, you can join midway through. So this is on the stuff we did last week and on some of the words from earlier this year. I forgot to put the sound on again. Okay, what is rhythm? We had a look at that last week, but in terms of poetry. Like Kahoot, but we do it on our own. General knowledge of three modes. Ooh, thank you guys. I will take that on board for next week. Nice. Yeah, patterns of beats in a poem. We said rhythm last week is like when you read the line, you say it based on the syllables of the line. So it is the beats, kind of like in music, how you have like one, two, three, four. Okay. A combination of two or three stressed or unstressed syllables is called. I know this was a little bit difficult last week. It was definitely something new, and maybe even slightly above your age range, but it's good to get the key terms in early so that when you do this in school, you'll be ready and raring. Okay. An unstressed followed by a stressed syllable. Like, they're dumb. I anticipate this might be a little difficult this week. Nice. People remembered it was an iamb, such as iambic pentameter. Ooh, Farid leading us on the early doors. Okay, a stressed followed by an unstressed syllable. Hey, yeah, a trochee, opposite of an iamb. Nice remembering. Farid says, why are we doing English in the holidays? Because English doesn't stop. English keeps going. You're speaking every day, you're not. Always good revision. How many feet are in a line of a tetrameter? We said, look at the prefix last week. Tetra means a certain number. Nice. Half people remembered it was four. So tetra is prefix meaning four. Okay. Oh, slightly harder now. What is a dactyl? See who remembers. Okay. Same four people, I'm assuming. Been revising. Yeah, a dactyl is when you have a stressed followed by two unstressed syllables. Not a particularly common form of poetic meter. Which of these words, when pronounced correctly, is not a trochee? So we said stressed followed by unstressed trochee. Okay, yeah, mature, because like England, tissue, legend, mature. So it's the opposite. Mature is an I am, not a trochee. Lines without punctuation tend to. Oh, perfect. A lot easier this time. Most people getting, yeah, run on. Yeah, if you don't have punctuation, a sentence is just not going to stop. So we tend to call it a run on sentence. You find mostly in poetry, to be honest. Okay, what is a dimeter? Think about it. Again, di is a prefix for a certain number. Okay, see who has been revising. It is two. Yeah, two. A dimeter, di means two. Tetra, it was four. Bonk, that's a fun name. There is a difference between rhyme and rhythm. Is that true or is that false? Okay, I'm gonna start skipping. Nice. Oh, only one person said no. There absolutely is a difference, and I'm hoping by the end of today you'll understand what that difference is. Okay, halfway through, lines with full stops and or semicolons often. It's always the same last person. Yes, slow down. If you have a full stop, well, it makes you stop reading, so it would make sense that you slow down. Okay, short and long lines have the same effect. Is that true or is that false? Oh, some quick answers on this one. I'm hoping for some good results. Thank you. I'll blue kit, don't know how you pronounce it, but I'll look at it for next week. Nice. Again, only one person. It is false. Of course, they do not have the same effect. Think about our pacing of sentences. Okay, the ends of lines are called, think back to our basic poetry terms. Ooh. Only three people remember back. They were line breaks. I think I've got that diagram again for you today, but you'll see that I labeled on what the end of a line was, and it was a line break. Okay, line lengths are measured by the amount of something in each line. Think about last week. Ooh, it is feet. Think back last week, we did metrical feet, where there is feet within meters. Oh, Farad's back on top this time. Okay, a rhythmical pause in a poetic line is. Now, this is not something we've been through, but I'm hoping if I drill it into you earlier enough, you'll remember by the time we get there next week. Nice. Considering not many people have done it, 7 out of 9 is pretty good to me. Scissor. Okay, what is a monometer? I think there's only one more poetry question, and then we'll do something else. Okay, mono again stands for a number. Nice. Mono means one, such as monomer, one. Ooh, bonk on top. Okay. Which word means a rapid burst of shots and noises? I put in some vocabulary revision as well, based on the ones I gave you back in September. Hey, most people remembered it is a fusillade. It's a really good word to have in your pocket for imagery-based writing and metaphors and things like that. Which word means without interest or emotion? Okay, I'm gonna start skipping. It is apathetic. Nice. Okay, what is the word for a secret meeting? Again, a really nice noun to have for higher level imagery work. Ooh, not many people got this. It is conclave. A countenance is like your demeanor, whereas conclave is the meeting. Okay, three more. Having a huge appetite or being very eager. It's always one person. It's always one person. Ooh, pretty even split against the remaining three, but it is voracious. Think back to Oliver Twist, where I got that word from for you. Okay, a word that means empty, lonely, and without life. Be careful here. I've put four very similar words in. Nice. Last time I put this in, it tripped a lot of people up. Desolate. I would understand why you went with dreary, but that's not necessarily empty. Foreboding, again, not necessarily empty. Grim, again, emptiness, whereas desolate specifically relates to emptiness and isolation. Okay, last question. A word that means believing things too easily. Only one person. I want to know who it was. Credulous. Absolutely right. Come on. Think it might be Bonk, but let's have a look. Very nice. Yeah, well done. And as always, thank you for participating. I appreciate it. I will get on to the other website next week and I'll have some more varied things for us to do because I think Kahoot's getting a little bit old now, isn't it? Okay. You went after 28 years. Ah, man. Yeah, but that's the thing. Competition. You should always be striving to win. And to win, you need to revise. Okay. Just as a very brief revision then, before we do what we're doing today. I wanted to remind you of these key terms because today we're going to look at rhyme schemes and stanzas. And in our basic poetry terminology, I talked you through the very basic differences between closed and open poetry. Closed is a type of poetry that you'll associate with more classic poets, your Shakespeare's, Emily Dickinson, that kind of thing. And they tend to have very strict rhyme schemes, as well as very strict rhythms. And you might associate them with your sonnets and your haikus and your villanelles, that kind of thing. Whereas open form is a lot more free. And sometimes we call it free verse because it's not constrained by the normal rules of poetry. There might be a rhythm, there might be rhyme, but if there is, it'll be very irregular, if there's even rhyme at all. Structure, again, it might have different stanza lengths or different line lengths that will be inconsistent. Um, and we're going to look at mostly closed today. So, I briefly just wanted to remind you of all the key terms again. So, what do we call in the chat? What do we call um, a paragraph of text in a poem? Does anyone remember? Stanza, absolutely right. Oh, I've gone with line first, but stanza, yeah. And the point of a stanza is to separate ideas, very much like paragraphs in books. When a paragraph changes, it's when an idea has changed, or the story has changed, or a character has changed. Something changes in each stanza. The rhyme scheme we'll come on to today, and then last week we looked at rhythm, which is the syllables of the line. So let's first think about stanzas. Nice stanzas. People getting all the answers right. Nice to see. So a stanza is literally just a paragraph of lines in a poem. It's a section of a poem in which there will be a certain amount of lines. And stanzas don't just come in one form, they can come in many forms, depending on how long they are. So stanzas come in all shapes and sizes and are most commonly defined by their length. Very similar to normal English, where you look at how long a paragraph is, and that can tell you something. A stanza can even be as short as two lines, and a stanza might also follow a specific meter or rhyming scheme. So, what is the role of a stanza before we look at some examples? Well, we know what stanzas are. They're for various reasons. Things like structure. They're there to create the framework of a poem. They're also there for organization of ideas. They kind of function exactly like paragraphs in a book. When something changes, the paragraph will change. So if you get a new stanza in a poem, you know that something has changed, whether it's character, story, theme, time, something has changed if there's a new paragraph. So it can signal things like new ideas, shifts in perspective or narrative, that sort of thing. Rhythm as well. The length of a paragraph can determine the syllables of the stanza itself. And then even things like mood changes. So if there's a character, maybe they've changed the way that they feel. And then finally, the one that I wanted to talk a bit more about today is the shape of a poem. Poems can come in all different shapes, and the shape of that poem should tell you something more in depth about that poem. And I'll show you this poem today by George Herbert. It's called Easter Wings. So I don't want to go through all of these, but these are the kind of stanzas you could get. Very similar to last week, the prefix of a word tells you how many lines are in that stanza. So in the quiz, we just went over the fact that mono means one. So if a stanza is monostitch, it has one line. A couplet means two. So if a stanza is a couplet, it has two lines. If it's a tercet, it has three lines. Quatraint, four. Quintaint, five. So on and so on. And they're very similar to shapes in maths. So for example, when you get septets, that's like a septagon. Octave, it's like an octagon with eight sides. And so they follow that pattern quite nicely. Okay, but the two that I wanted to discuss a little bit further are these two here. Because it's worth saying that quintains to octaves don't really appear that often. What you'll more likely find are couplets and quatrains, so the most common stanza lengths, so the ones with two and four lines. But later, we will have a look at some open poems, and you will find in open poetry these two a little bit more. So, in a heterometric stanza, this is when every line is a different length. So, one line might be five syllables, the next one might be 10, the next one might be seven, the next one might be three. They'll all be different lengths of the lines. And you tend to get that in more open form poetry. And then in isometric poem, that's when every line has the same number of syllables. But the ones I want to focus on today are couplets, quatrains, and heterometric poems. Let's see what's been said. So for each stanza, would the poet include different topics? Yeah, it's exactly like a story. If a paragraph changes, the topic has changed. Exactly that. So I guess it's worth saying before we go on to this then, most closed poems have what we call regular and consistent stanza lengths. When I say regular and consistent, I just mean they don't change. But if they do change, it is for a reason. It will be the writer trying to tell you something if they do change. So I want to look at this example. William Shakespeare, you'll all be familiar with Shakespeare. He wrote love sonnets. These were poems that were 14 lines and they were about love in various forms. So, I won't read this all to you, just I'll read the first stanza. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day, thou art more lovely and temperate? Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. Now, I don't really want to focus on the content of the poem. I just more want to ask you this. What do you notice about the physical structure of this poem in terms of the lengths of these stanzas? How many lines does each stanza have? And I've highlighted at the bottom a bit I want you to notice. How many lines do each of these stanzas have? Farid says, oh, we'll come back to rhyme scheme. Be absolutely right, Farid. 4, 4, 4, 2. Yep. Yeah, absolutely right. This one has four, this one has four, four, and this last one has two. So I just told you on the last slide that most have a consistent stanza length, but when it changes for a reason. So this poem's about love, specifically about the impermanence of life. And the only thing that is permanent is love, is what Shakespeare writes in this poem. So why would Shakespeare change from four-line stanzas to two? Well, it's there to tell you something. And I'll tell you because this is quite complicated, but I hope it gives you some idea. Most of this poem is written in four-line quatrains, but the last stanza, as most of you picked out, is evidently two lines. And this symbolizes a change in perspective to highlight the message of the overall poem. This poem is about the impermanence of life, and the only permanent thing being the love that Shakespeare, the poet, feels for someone else. So by having that separate two lines at the bottom, it's trying to give you the idea that you should focus on what is being said in these last two lines. So the shift to a couplet puts that focus on the fact that love is the only permanent thing. His love becomes immortalized, or he believes that love is immortal. It's the only thing that cannot die. Um, so that's what he's trying to say. He's trying to say that everything said here is about nature, it's about impermanence, but having that change at the bottom is solidifying what is being said in the bottom two lines, which is that love is permanent. And he says, so long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. And he's talking about love. So he's saying that as long as men can see and they can breathe, love will exist in the world. And it's one of the only things that will never die. Unlike nature, where things do die, things decay. Okay. So, Villanelle by William Epson. It's gone a bit blurry when I've expanded the screen. But this poem is about lost love. So I wanted to pick one that was opposite from Shakespeare's. This is about love, and this one's about lost love, or unrequited love, we call it. Um, I'll tell you what it's about. Um, he uses tercets, as you can see. There are stanzas of three lines, and he does that to write about lost love, basically. And three-line structure can basically creates a very subtle rhythm in which he talks about the cyclical nature of feeling grief. So when you lose someone that you love, you grieve for them, and that's what this poem is about. So the three-line stanzas give this idea of almost feeling incomplete, like you do if you were to experience heartbreak. Now, knowing what we know, that this is about lost love and grieving that person, why do you think the last stanza has changed to be four lines instead of three? A bit of a complex question, I know, because you don't know the poem very well. But does anyone have any ideas why you'd go from three line stanzas to suddenly having a fourth longer one at the end, when the topic is about grieving loved ones? Any ideas? They are used in serious poems. Farrah says for emphasis. I mean, it is for emphasis. It's to emphasize something. This rest of this poem has been about grief. I mean, this is a very mature question. So I'm not going to ask you directly, but if you have experienced grief, a lot of people get to a point where at the end of grief, they get, I don't know if you've heard of the five stages of grief. After, after you reach the end of grief, you get to this period of acceptance. That's kind of what this bottom stanza is about. This whole thing is about pain and feeling um, painful grief for your loved one. But having this last change to a quadrant is symbolic that your life goes on after grief. Um, Changing the perspective shows that this idea of kindness endures. And that, yeah, you can extend beyond grief. Show that the poem has a lot to say. He's accepting what's happened. Nice. Accepting what's happened. Boom. Got that before I even said it. I didn't even read the chat. Yeah, accepting what has happened. Exactly. The five stages of grief. And this is about acceptance at the bottom. So it's symbolic of that. By the fact that he's added an extra line, it's symbolic that life goes on beyond the original three lines. He feels like a three-line life. Every stanza is three lines. So by suddenly extending the stanza, it's becoming symbolic of the fact that life goes on beyond the three lines, if it were. Nice, well done. Didn't think anybody would get that. Good, well done. Okay, the last one then, as an example. Um, Liverpool, a poem by Carol Ann Duffy. And now, those of you who aren't at GCSE yet, when you get to GCSE, you will come across Carol Ann Duffy. She is probably one of the most famous poet writers in the modern age, at least. So you will come across at least one of her poems at GCSE. Now, she wrote this poem called Liverpool. A lot of you may not I don't know if many people know this, but this poem is about the Hillsborough tragedy. It was this event back in the 80s or 90s, I can't remember exactly when it was, where a really large crowd stampeded the Liverpool football club stadium, and a few people died in that tragedy. And so she wrote a poem about this, about losing the men in that tragedy. Now, what do you notice straight away about the length of the stanzas? Are any of them different from the rest? In the chat, are any of them different from the rest? Hopefully, there should be some one of them's evidently different from the rest. I'll tell you, it's the last one. Notice we've got four lines, four lines, four lines, and then we've ended on a two-line stanza down here. Yes, the last one is two lines long. Nice. So if we know that this poem is about a tragedy, it's about grief, it's about loss again, it's about violence, why might we have a sudden change to a two-line stanza after you've had four lines? Think about what's being said. Over this great city, light after long dark, and truth, the sweet silver song of the lark. Any ideas why? If we're talking so long about loss, and then we suddenly change perspective in our in our stanza, why might we do that? For grief and sorrow? Yes. Think about the last poem. After you've been through all of this grief and all of this loss, acceptance comes at the end. And acceptance is a lot more of a positive thing. Somebody said loss isn't permanent. Oh, I like that. I'm going to go with that. I think that's a really nice way of putting it. Yeah, by ending on that sort of couplet, shifts the perspective from grief to optimism and hope. And I think loss isn't permanent is a really nice way of putting it. That after death and grief, there is a period of hope and acceptance. And that couplet is there to bring peace to the reader by moving away from all this, the loss and the grief. The poet shows what is left beyond her loss. Yeah, it's exactly that. It's showing that the past has happened, but you can move on, and there is hope. There is a period where you can get better, and that's what she's trying to say. Okay, now those were all examples of structure. How you can change the number of lines per the stanzas, and it tells you something. Now, in poetry, I mentioned shape. It's rare, but there are some really classic examples of how poets can use shape to their advantage. Now, this is a poem called Easter Wings by George Herbert. Um, what do you notice about the shape of this poem? Anyone see anything interesting here? It's clearly not like other poems. It looks like the Greek sigma symbol. Yeah, I don't know what that looks like. I think, oh no, is that the one that, yeah, it does actually. It does look like that. I don't think that that's what the poets were intending, but it creates an object with words, but like shadows. The poem is called Easter Wings, highlighting the word wings. Has anyone see anything? Someone said it looks like an M. Farah's got it. They're wings. They look like wings. Nice. So it symbolizes something important. So Um, yeah, we don't need to know what this poem's about. I just wanted to show you the wing structure because poems can be interesting looking like that. So I'll tell you, Herbert uses heterometric paired lines here, varying the length of each line. So the reason it's heterometric is because each line has a different number of syllables and they're clearly different lengths from each other. The ones at the top here on the right are clearly longer than the ones here and then towards the middle. So he uses that to his advantage to create this physical wing shape. The lines aren't uniform, they're varying in lengths to create the visual wing shape, and each stanza functions as a self-contained unit, reflecting fall and redemption. I think this poem is, I've never read it, but I think it is a religious one. Correct me if anyone knows. But the contracting and expanding lines mirror human weakness and spiritual ascent. So yeah, by kind of creating that wing structure, I think someone said it before, it tells you something, it symbolizes something. And in this case, it symbolizes human weakness and spiritual ascent. making the theme of fall and redemption physical on the page. Now, another example. This poem is called The Mouse's Tale. Is there anything interesting you've noticed about the structure? Let's see what you come up with. Again, it's going a bit blurry. I do apologize, and I've extended the slide. The poem is in the shape of a mouse. It's in the shape of a tail. Yeah, it is. It's in the shape of a tail. Look at it. It goes curl all the way down. Nice. Now, the writer has done this on purpose. I don't know if any of you have ever read Alice in Wonderland, the book, not the film. The original book, this poem is from that text. Yeah, and it's a really interesting way to structure a stanza. Um, Not very common at all, but this is mostly a single continuous stanza, shaped like a tail. That's well cool. It's more about line length and visual tapering than traditional standard stanza divisions. The tail effect is achieved by gradually shortening the lines as you go down. As you can, I mean, it's gone very blurred, but if you were able to see it properly, a lot of these are just singular words. And then these are like two words, some of them three words. Yeah, it's a very interesting way to play with shape. Okay, and the last one I'll show you. Looks like a tail. This one, Swan and Shadow by John Hollander. What do you notice about the shape of this poem? I mean, I've kind of given you a nice helpful diagram. Swan, it's a swan, not just a swan. There's a swan, but then also a reflection of a swan. It's symmetrical. A swan in a lake, a swan with its shadow, and it's swimming. Absolutely. Again, a very interesting way to structure the shape of a poem, really. He does so by using three verse stanzas. Again, changing the line length of each poem. Again, it's got very blurred. I don't know why it does this when I expand the slides, but yeah, notice that that's a singular word, two words, three words, one, all the way down. Yeah, a very interesting way to structure a poem. Yeah, very interesting. I want to show you those as examples. They're very rare that you would get that kind of visual poetry, but they do occur. And if any of you are interested in writing poetry, it will like, yeah, it'd be very cool to get something like that. If any of you are like joint artists as well, that would be really cool. Okay, right. Let's have a look at a couple of questions because there isn't really that much to think about when we think about stanza length. It's more thinking about if anything changes. So, how does stanza length affect the reader here? A very, very short poem called In a Station of the Metro. The apparition of these faces in the crowd, petals on a wet black brow. That is the entire poem. Just two lines. So, firstly, which type of stanza has been used? Why do you think the poem is only one stanza? What is the writer trying to tell the reader? And how does the single stanza make you feel? Have a bit of a think about that. Yes. Already one correct answer in the chat. Anyone else? It's boring because it tells you nothing. No, this is a beautiful poem. My favorite poems are short like this because they are the ones that hold so much hidden analysis. Poetry is beautiful. Nice. It is a couplet. A couplet, two lines. Couple. Think couple, two. Yes, it's a couplet. Why do you think there's only one stanza? I should have really included here. What do you think the poem is about? The apparition of these faces in the crowd, petals on a wet black brow. It's called In a Station of the Metro. What do you think this poem is about? Any ideas? Just throw some at me. Don't matter if you're wrong. Poetry is about an interpretation anyway. Any ideas what you think the poem is about? The subway metro tunnels. It's definitely set in the subway metro tunnels. It describes faces in the crowd as being apparitions, petals on a wet black brow. If we break this down, we're going to look more at language next week. But when we think of petals, like wet petals, think about in the wind. If a petal gets blown away, we tend to see that as imagery of impermanence, that nature just sort of moves on and things reset. Let's see what's being said. Sorry, I've ignored this. Shadows and faces, dark, gloomy, waiting for the train. If we're thinking very literally, yeah, it is about a person waiting for the train. And what's happened is that the metro has sped past, and all you can see are all these blurred faces through the windows of the train. Um, that's what's literally happening. On a metaphoric, symbolic level, what do you think this poem's about? Because literally, you're all right. Yeah, it's about the metro, it's about blurry faces, it's about waiting for a train. But what's it about emotionally? What's it about symbolically? Anyone have any input? Again, it's a difficult question, but this is poetry for you. The metro has gone so fast that the poet has nothing else to say. I disagree. I think so much is said here without being actually said. When the train goes past, do you get to focus on the people in the train? No, because it's going really, really fast. Life is about that. How everyone is leaving to somewhere new. Ooh, I hadn't thought about it about like that, but that's a really nice way of thinking about it. Ooh, Farid said how everyone is leaving to somewhere new. This is the beauty of poetry, that there are interpretations, and that is a beautiful interpretation. To me, I would tell you what I think this poem is about. I think it's about being able to capture those fleeting moments in life. I said this, right? It's written from a single two-line couplet. A lot of people got that right. It's only one stanza to capture the fleeting moment that this is. Like the moment the train whooshing past, the poem is really short, and that structurally represents the quick moment that's just occurred in the poem, of the train whooshing past. The sudden impression of faces in the crowd emphasize immediacy and intensity. It's trying to tell you that life is beautiful, that you can miss moments of life. If you're not there concentrating, if you're not there being present in your life, you're going to miss these very fleeting moments in your life. Um, and life is only beautiful if you begin to notice these moments that occur. So the single stanza makes the reader feel sudden, sharp, and vivid, as if glimpsing a brief, striking image. The poem mimics what it is like to experience life moment by moment. One moment is here, the next it is gone. Like the train. The train was here, then it's gone. And life is exactly the same. But I do like Farad's interpretation. That was really, really nice. But yeah, does that make sense? It is. I love this poem. I think it's very beautiful. The fact that nothing is ever the same and things are constantly changing, yeah, that's what this poem is about. Live in the moment. Okay, I'll give you the next one. Bit longer, poem called Autumn. As I'm reading through this, think about what is this poem about? Which type of stanza has been used? Why do you think the poem is only one stanza long? And what is the writer trying to tell the reader? Does it reflect anything, any themes? And how does the single stanza make you feel or understand about autumn? So, autumn. Autumn arrives like an experienced robber, grabbing the green stuff, then cunningly covering his tracks with a deep multitude of colourful distractions. And the wind, the hair is his accomplice. The wind is his accomplice, putting an air of chaos into the careful diversions. So branches shake and dead leaves are suddenly blown in the faces of inquisitive strangers. The theft chills the world, changes the temper of the earth till the normally placid sky glows red with a quiet rage. Okay, first and foremost, what do you think it's about? You're not allowed to say autumn because it is about autumn. It's called autumn. What do you think it's really about on a deeper level? Any ideas? Think about it. It says that autumn is like an experienced robber. And I might reuse this poem when we look at language next week because it's a really good poem for language. The robber, the wind is his accomplice, the chaos in the air, branches are shaking, um, changes the temper of the earth, a withering life. How autumn is very complex, so many things are going on, like the leaves and festivities, change in the seasons, cruelty, ooh, a rebirth. All of these are really nice. Yeah, a rebirth. I like that. I think rebirth is probably the closest to the correct answer of what this poem is about. When you think of autumn, you think of fallen leaves, you think of those leaves dying, and then the new tree blooms in its place. It's rebirth, isn't it? It's what autumn's really about. I said this. It's all one heterometric stanza. There's no rhyme scheme, it just changes the line length. And the reason that is rebirth. Things are constantly changing. And the fact that this poem never stops is one continuous poem. It's uninterrupted, much like the way that autumn moves through the landscape. Um, yeah, it's about change, transformation of the world, telling us that transformation and rebirth is inevitable. We can't stop change. It's going to come for us whether we like it or not. And the flowing stanza mirrors the gradual but relentless passage of time and keeps the reader fully immersed in the scene, highlighting the feeling of inescapable change. Yeah, it's about change. It's about change. It's inescapable, but it's coming for you. Like how a robber steals money, autumn steals time. The wind bringing chaos with it. On a literal level, wind moves things, it pushes things on. You can't fight the wind. The wind is always going to blow whether you want it to or not. Yeah, that's what the poem's about. A symbol of death. Autumn changes the world, making the colours seem warmer. Yes, it is about change. It's all about change. Heterometric. Nice. We're getting it. I like it. Okay. Now, I factored more time in for rhyme. So what we don't do this week, we will continue next week into language. Um, and when we get into language, we'll start getting into analysis a little bit more. Because we've not really been doing too much analysis because I wanted to go through each separate skill first because you can't really analyze when you don't know what you're looking for. So, rhyme. Rhyme is important in poetry. Um, yeah, I put this in just for anyone who doesn't know what rhyme is. But rhyme is are words that are phonetically similar. Ball, tall, or fine, pine. Words that sound very similar. And poems use rhyme to convey meaning. Um, Often, rhyme schemes can be either regular or irregular. Most poems have a regular rhyme scheme. What I mean by regular is that they're consistent. So it will be like A B A B A B A B, and it will be consistent throughout the entire poem. Whereas other poems are irregular, meaning that sometimes there are no rhyme schemes at all. And if there are, it might be like one line and then the fifth line. I don't know, the eighth line and the 10th line. Yeah, it's not going to be consistent. So that should tell you something. We will look at figurative language, yes, next week. Okay, so rhyme schemes. Um, when you do poems in GCSE, you will have to be able to work out rhyme schemes. Now, a rhyme scheme you can work out, kind of like the image I've shown you below. You can work them out by giving each line that rhymes the same letter of the alphabet. So, for example, in this poem, shine rhymes with line, so I give them both an A because they both rhyme with each other. Way rhymes with bay, so I give them both a separate letter. Glance and dance rhyme, so I give them a letter. I give all the words that rhyme the same letter. So A, B, C, C. That's how I work out a rhyme scheme. Can you do the same with this one? I think we did this one a couple of weeks ago, but can someone tell me what is the rhyme scheme to this poem? We've got Isabel rhymes with dwell, and well. They all rhyme together. Isabel, dwell, well. We've got a bit of a half rhyme here. We've got I and melody. Um, you kind of got to imagine it says like I and melody. So they rhyme together. Buy, I, sleep, weep. What would this rhyme scheme be? How do you know what letter to give each word? Start from the beginning of the alphabet. So do it in chronological order of the poem. So Isabel is the first line, so I'd give that A. And anything that rhymes with Isabel, give that also an A, because it's the first letter of the alphabet. Then move on to the second line of the poem. If that's got a different rhyme to Isabel, then give that a different letter, B. And anything rhymes that with I, give that a B as well. Next, get down to to a different word that doesn't rhyme and give that the next letter, which is C. So it doesn't really matter, but we tend to start from A and work our way down, if that makes sense. So, okay, we've got a few answers coming in. A, B, A, B, A, B, C, C, A, B, A, B, C, C, D, D. Oh, we got two conflicting answers. Let's see, Farid. A, B, A, B, A, B, C, D, D. Ooh, interesting. I'll show you. So we've got Isabel, dwell well, I, malady by, sleep weep. So I'd give those an A, those a B, and those a C. A, B, A, B, A, B, C, C, which is nice. A couple of you got some D's in there. What went wrong? You've rhymed those two together. Oh, you've only put two A's in. Five and Farid. Nice. Yeah. So anything that rhymes, give the same letter. Yeah, the purpose of a rhyme scheme. Or I'll only ask you this. Why might a writer use a certain rhyme? Is there anything we could work out from rhyme? The ideas. Why might a writer use rhyme? It's not something that can give loads away, but it can definitely tell you something about a poem. Emotions. Yeah, I think that's the biggest one. I think rhyme can give away emotions of a poem. It can make the reader, feel a certain way. And it can also tell you about the emotions of characters and things like that. Feeling, absolutely. I think emotion is the main one. It definitely gives emotion. And I think the second biggest one is it reflects the themes and writer's intentions as well. Kind of similar to like we said about stanza length. It's not really about the specific rhyme that's been used. It's more about if anything changes. That should tell you something. Yeah, that should tell you something. So often poets use certain rhyme schemes because it shows their emotional focus. So someone said emotions and feelings, and it often reflects themes. It should be more poetic, full of emotions and feelings. Absolutely. So there's different kinds of rhyme you can get. Ignore these two for now. I was feeling a bit ambitious. I think about these. They're less complicated than they seem. I promise I'm not throwing big words at you this week. End rhyme is literally when there's a rhyme at the end of lines. So like we saw here. Isabel, dwell well, I, by, sleep we. This is end rhyme because they're at the end of lines. I rhymes also at the end of rhymes, end of lines, sorry. But they're words that look like they should rhyme, but don't when you speak them out loud. So, for example, love and move both end with OVE. So they look like they should rhyme, but they don't. Love and move. They sound different, but they look the same. That's what an I rhyme is. It's called an I rhyme because they look the same with your eyes, but they do not sound the same. And then there's half rhyme. Half rhyme is very similar. You might have heard of half rhyme. It's very common with free verse poets. Rhyme uses similar but not identical sounds. So, for example, shape and keep both use the P, but the rest of the word is different. So, yeah, you might come across half rhyme as well. Mina says, ah, panic. Yeah, I and Malady are half rhymes. Absolutely right. Because they kind of sound semi-similar, but they're not, they don't sound identical. Like I and Malady, they both end with a Y, so it's kind of, yeah, a little bit. So how much time have I got to go? I will go through one example with you and we will save the rest until next week. So, to understand the purpose of a specific rhyme scheme, think about how the words sound and how they make you feel. Often, the rhyming sounds reflect the emotions and themes of the poems. And most closed form poems will have a specific, consistent, regular rhyme scheme. But if it changes, it does so for a reason. Oh, Mina meant O, not R. She wasn't screaming. All good. Okay, we'll do this one then. I had a few examples for you. We'll come back to them next week. So, Sonnet 18, back to Shakespeare's love poem. When you think of sonnets, you'll think of this one. It's his famous poem. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day, thou art more lovely and more temperate? So, what is the rhyme scheme of this poem? Does anyone know? See if you can get this one. What is the rhyme scheme of this poem? Anyone have any ideas? End rhyme, it is end rhyme, but what is the rhyme scheme? Come on, we get it right this time. Uh, Match the letter, match the days that rhyme. Day rhymes with May, temperate rhymes with date. It's a bit of a half rhyme, but we'll accept it. Shines, declines, dimmed, untrimmed, fade, shade, oust, grossed, C and thee. A B A B, A B A B, C D C D E, F E F G G. Nice. Someone absolutely nailed it. It is all of those letters. So, why? Why do you think Shakespeare chose this ABAB rhyme scheme when he's talking about love? How do the words and the rhymes make you feel? Like day, May, temperate and date. They shines and declines, and they dimmed and they untrimmed, and they fade and they shade, and they see and they thee. How does that make you feel? Is there any sort of emotions that that brings up in you? Again, no wrong answers, just this is poetry. It's all about feeling. Love is simplistic, and anyone can find true love. That is an absolutely beautiful and, dare I say, poetic answer. I love that. Yeah. Calm atmosphere, love. Absolutely. That's the point. That's the reason. That's the reason he's chosen this rhyme scheme. Simply because it sounds romantic. It sounds simplistic and that anyone can find true love. Yeah, by using something that sounds very lovely, is reinforcing the message of the poem, which is that love is enduring and that you can immortalize love and that it lives on past anything else. Very, very nice. Okay, we'll leave the rest for next week. I have a few examples for you, but we ain't got time this week. So, said heart touching. I think it is. It is heart touching, isn't it? So, yeah, next week, I will get some new games for us to start. We're going to do some actual analysis with language of poetry. And then we've literally got one more session of poetry after that, and then we can move on. So if anyone has anything they want me to go through specifically after poetry, please, I'm taking suggestions. Yeah, please say so. That's what we're here for. Can we do one art? What is one art? I don't, is that, what is that? One art. Okay, but otherwise, thank you, Key Stage 3. I appreciate you as always. And you're welcome to stay for Key Stage 4. I'm gonna talk you through how to analyze a text for question 3 of structure. Oh, did you? I probably just not read the chat, sorry. Sometimes I get a lot of messages and they kind of overlap each other. Okay. Right. We're going to take 2 minutes. Again, you're welcome to stay. Thank you for coming, Key Stage 3. And we'll give it a few seconds for people to join for Key Stage 4. And if you are from Key Stage 4 GCSE, welcome in. Nice evening. I hope you're having a really good holiday so far. Right. And I'll be back with you in 2 minutes to do a practice whole text. We got there. We got to this point finally. Right. Welcome in to those who've joined us for Key Stage 4. We are going to analyze right now. Yeah, so welcome to Key Stage 4. Thank you for staying if you stayed from the previous session. So we are going to look today at doing a practice run at a whole text of structure. So, a few things before we go through our practice, and we'll talk a few ideas through. We've been looking a lot at structure, and I want to put that into play today, focusing a little bit more on AQA. But that's not to say that this is useless to any of you that aren't doing AQA, because the skill is exactly the same. It's just that as we've been through in the past, AQA asks the structure question slightly differently to every other exam board. So we have to do it separately. Now, for those of you who are doing AQA, your exam question will look like this. It will be from paper 1, question 3, and it will say something along the lines of, you now need to think about the whole of the source. The text is from here. Now, this is a good time for me to say that they will tell you where the text is from in the novel. So it might say the middle of a novel, it might say the start of a novel, it might say the end of a novel. It will tell you. And that is important for your answer because that will determine the effect on the reader depending on where the extract's from. Because if it's near the beginning, it's like you might be introduced to the characters. If it's near the middle, you might be in the climax and the action. And if it's at the end, well, you're going to be at the resolution, and all three are going to make you feel differently. So, how has the writer structured the text to interest you as a reader? Now, it is also worth me saying that from 2026, this year, the structure of this question is changing. So in the past, it's always been, how is the writer structure of the text to interest you as a reader? Now that the question is no longer going to be interest. Um, it will be more specific than that. So it will say something like, how has the writer structured the text to create suspense or to create mystery or to create tension or to create an ominous atmosphere? It will be a lot more structured. So it will no longer be as general as interest for those of you who are sitting the exam. Now, it tells you here that you should write about what the writer focuses your attention on at the beginning of the source, how and why the writer changes this focus as the source develops, and any other structural features that interest you. So we've been through many different structural features over the past few weeks, and we're going to do a practice today to begin picking those out. So just some general advice for this kind of question. It's only 8 marks, so you should be spending 12, 13 minutes on this. Normally in an exam, it's 1.5 minutes per mark. So if you're spending any more than 12 or 13 minutes on this, you're probably spending too long. But what I would do when you first read this question is highlight the keywords because you need to know what the question is actually asking you. As I said, it won't be interest. So you need to know exactly what you're being asked of because everything you write in your answer should directly answer the question. And if it doesn't, you're going to lose marks. So what I would do is always reread the extract and consider what happens and when. We've said structure is about who, what, why, where, and when. We need to know about who's speaking, when this is taking place, where is it taking place, what's happening, does anything change? Now, in terms of per paragraph, I would try, if you want the higher bands, use 3 structural devices per paragraph. I would also use a wide range of well-chosen evidence, usually 2 to 3 quotes per paragraph. And I would analyze the effect on the reader as much as possible. So this is the mark scheme for this question. And I wanted to kind of gauge with you how you get to the top bands. Notice here there's 3 different bullet points for each marking band. The first thing that you get marked on is attempting to comment on the structural features, the effect, and they've highlighted in the mark scheme the word effect. So that's being able to say how it affects the reader. And we've been through the acronym FALTS many times. So feel, ask, understand, link, think, sympathize. So you should always be considering what is the effect of that structural device, not just what has been done, but also how it impacts the reader. So, how it creates suspense, how it creates interest, how it creates tension, mystery, whatever the question is. Now, for that upper band, it doesn't just say simple comment, attempts, or explains. It says analyzes the effect of the writer's choice. So that means a detailed description. Now, they also want a judicious range of examples, basically meaning 2 to 3 quotes per paragraph, please. If you're not doing that, then you're not reaching a range of judicious examples. You're simply just selecting relevant materials, whereas they need well chosen range. Now, you also get marked on terminology. Now, luckily, someone has been giving you terminology over the past 2 weeks. So I would recommend using 2 to 3 or even 3+ structural devices per paragraph. And it's worth saying correctly. Use them accurately. Don't just throw them in if you think they're in there. Make sure that you know that that is the actual device being used and use it accurately. Because if you don't, then you're not going to get the marks for accuracy or sophistication. So please do that. And I would recommend 2 to 3 Peter paragraphs. Now, I would do 2 detailed or 3 not very detailed. Take your pick. That's up to you. Okay, and I wanted to briefly remind you as well the effect on the reader. So, always trying to use one of these words when you're explaining the effect on the reader, just to make it easier on yourself, or any other relevant verbs that you think are useful. So, just to very briefly go over this before we start going through some example answers, then. How does the writer create interest? How do they actually do that? What are some points you could make? Well, one of them is curiosity. Surely curiosity is of interest. If you're curious, you want to read on. Suspense, if there's an action sequence and you're on the edge of your seat, surely that one is interesting. Emotional connection to the characters. Do you feel sympathy for a character? Do you relate to a character in any way? Do you care for them? Do you not care for them? Why is that interesting? Contrast and surprise. So if there's contrasting things happening, or if there's a really big sudden change, that can be interesting. Rising and falling tension, mystery. Often in stories, we learn at the same time as the characters. So if we're slowly getting fed new details, that's going to keep us engaged because we want to learn more. Encouraging reflection and introspection. So if the book makes you feel introspective, that it makes you think about your own life, that could be of interest to you. Any sudden twists that make you reevaluate what we know and felt. So, just for the next few minutes before we go on to looking at our own extracts, I wanted to show you some examples from AQA of different banded marks. And I'm going to get you to think, based on the mark scheme, what mark this would have got. So I'll read it through. At the beginning of the source, the writer focuses your attention on the blackbird by describing what it does in Alex's dream. However, as the source develops, the writer begins to focus your attention on the reality of Alex's life. This is shown from lines 12 to 15 when he starts talking about the fact that Alex is going to have a bad day. This makes you interested because it makes you feel intrigued as to what actually happens during the day. This makes the reader continue reading because they want to know what happens next as the source progresses. Now, some of the comments have already been left here. But what mark do you think this got out of eight? Just out of curiosity. Has anyone got any ideas? Notice there's only simple references. They've only used very simple subject terminology, and they've also only made a very simple comment. Someone said 3. Anyone agree? Anyone disagree with 3? Someone said 4. I'll tell you what this got. This got 2 out of 8. The reason being, as it says here, they've not used a single quote, firstly. Um, they've made reference to the text, but they've not used any direct quotes. So they're not going to get out of band 1 because they're not used quotes. They've also not used much subject terminology. They've said beginning, focus, and develops. So very, very simple use of terminology. Again, they've also only made a very simple comment on the structure. It makes me feel intrigued. It makes me want to read on. That's very basic analysis. Yes, you do have to use quotes, direct quotes from the text, 2 to 3 per paragraph, please, if you're aiming for that higher bands. Okay, what about the next one? Oh, I've given you the next one. This one's a 3 out of 8, so we'll skip it. What about this one? Oh, I'm going to struggle to read this handwriting, but I'll give it my best go. The writer zooms in on a character's situation at the start in order to introduce us to them. This gives us an insight of who they are. The nightmare could be foreshadowing what could have happened later on in the heat of it, could be a flashback to something horrible that had happened when Alex was a child. The text then changes to talk about a storm in paragraph 2. The use of long, complex sentences shows that that there's a lot of things going on at once, which overwhelms the protagonist. I'll skip this bit and focus on this. The last 2 paragraphs contradict each other in order for the writer to show the contrast between Alex's mother and father. This has an effect on the reader because it causes a biased view on the mother. Blah, 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 blah. Any idea what this would score? Marip says 4. Anyone want to anyone want to challenge 4 out of 8? Oh, 6 and 3. Ooh. Now focus on what it says here. Some use of subject terminology. Now I think they've been a bit harsh here actually on subject terminology because they've not highlighted some key terms. So whoever marked this one was being a bit harsh because they've said introduction to the character. That's a key term. They've also mentioned protagonist and long complex sentences. So I think that's a bit mean in terms of subject terminology. Um, However, I agree with the rest. I think there is an attempt to analyze that's maybe not very detailed. And again, they've used a couple of short quotes here, but nothing major. So this got 5 out of 8. So bottom of band 3. The mark scheme is a bit subjective. This is why marking English is quite difficult. Because personally, I agree with 5, but for different reasons. I think we're basically ranking you on different skills. So the first skill is using techniques correctly. So that's in the green. They've talked about zooming in, foreshadowing, flashbacks, changes, introduction to characters, complex sentences. So I think their terminology is relatively good for that standpoint. Yeah, this is GCSE. This is question 3 of AQA. Um, and then they also mark you on using quotes, which this person has not done very well. They've only used this one really long quote. So I would have marked them down for that. And then we mark you on your ability to explain or answer the question, which in this case, they've given not a very detailed answer to the question. Okay, so last one then. Again, I'm not going to read through all of this. You can do that in your own time. But just based on the comments at the sides, what do you think this might have got? These clear and accurate use of subject terminology, a range of relevant examples, perceptive analysis of structural features, sophisticated terminology, judicious range of examples, detailed and perceptive analysis of structural features. 6 to 8, 6. 6. It got 7. And the reason it got 7 and not 8 is because it lacks, again, some more complex structural devices. So they've talked about focus, they've talked at the beginning. Yeah, but they've not really used complex language devices, which I think the previous one did better at complex subject terminology, personally. But yeah, we've got 7. Ha ha, very funny, 6, 7. Okay, right. And there's another example if you want to read through it in your own time of a band 4 answer. Now, before we go through and do our own here today, there's one more thing I want to go through with you, and that's a Peter paragraph. Those who have been with me for a while know that I love a good Peter paragraph. I think this is how you should be structuring your answers. I think it's more detailed than point evidence explain. So you should always be trying to write like this, making the point. So, and this is where you answer the question. So if the question was about suspense, you would put the writer creates suspense by, and then make your points. If the question was about mystery, the writer creates mystery by, make your points. Follow that with a quote. So in the quote, blah, 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 or the writer says, blah, 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 blah. Then I get some subject terminology in there, making sure that you're using correct and sophisticated subject terminology. Then explain. This is interesting. This creates suspense because. And then following it with the reader. So how does it make you feel, ask, understand, think, or sympathize? How is this used like it is? How is this used like it is for the poems? We use it exactly like we do with the poems. When you even in English literature, I would still recommend using this kind of structure. So, a lot of people ask me how you use multiple quotes. Do I have any tips for using multiple quotes? Because sometimes it is quite hard to sort of subtly and naturally put in multiple quotes into an answer. Well, this is my advice. Blend. Don't try and force quotes in. You know, a lot of people will kind of fall back on this, like the writer says this, or and then they'll be like, the writer also says this. Whereas I think a better way of doing it is embedding your quotes into your sentences. So, for example, the cold sky and the dark sky create a bleak, threatening atmosphere. So rather than saying like the writer says a cold night, which suggests this, you should just be like the cold night and the dark sky create a bleak, threatening atmosphere. So that way, you're saving words, saving time, and you're getting all the skills ticked off. You've used quotes and you've started to analyze in the same sentence. A nice way of putting quotes in. Um, is it better to use long quotes or short ones? I would say short. A lot of people tend to like write entire lines out, but that's just time wasting and it's also not effective. You're better focusing on those shorter quotes. So, like here, use short embedded quotes, not long ones. So, for example, the character is pinned by fear and later cannot move. So, that's two separate quotes. To me, I'd be ticking, nice, that's a range. Because you've not just used one long quote, you've used two smaller quotes. Tick, tick, tick. Like I said, you're getting marked on a range of quotes. If you use one long quote, that's not a range, that's one quote. If you use two, 3 word quotes, tick, that's a range. So it's always better to use the shorter quotes. I'll show you one because we're going to do one together. But yes, always better to use short because you get the range ticks for the mark scheme. Compare or build between quotes is a good way of using multiple quotes. So, for example, um, show how the second quote adds, contrasts, or develops the first one. So, while pined by fear suggests mental paralysis, cannot move, extends this to a physical entrapment. So, you might want to do it that way. Either way, you're embedding the quotes in the sentence. Okay. And then also vary how you introduce them. So don't just say like the writer shows this or this shows or this demonstrates. Changing it up a little bit. And then group related quotes. So for example, if you're talking about semantic fields and things like that. But I think the main three are here. Focus on these. Okay, now someone said, can I show you an AQA paper? I absolutely can. It looks like this. So for those of you who are doing AQA English language, paper one looks like this. Um, it's split into 5 different questions, and you get an hour 45 for this entire thing. So you'll start off with an AO1. So those of you who've been coming to my previous sessions, we did quite a large chunk on AO1. And this is what question one is. It's only 4 marks, nice and simple. You then get a question on language specifically. So it'll say from extract lines, blah, 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 analyze how the writer uses language to do X, Y, and Z. So question two is about language. Question three, which is the one that we've been focusing on recently, is about structure by itself. So don't talk about language here, only talk about structure, because you will not get marks for language here. And then question four is assessment objective 4, which is about evaluation. So it'll give you a statement and it'll say to what extent do you agree. And then you've got to debate it. But we're going to cover that skill a bit later on. So today's question that we're going to look through for the next half an hour then is this one here. You now need to think about the whole of the source. The text is from the beginning of a novel. So off the bat, it tells us the text is from the beginning of a novel. How has the writer structured the text to interest you as a reader? So let's look through this together. And we're going to break it apart. So based on all the techniques that I've shown you over the past 2 weeks, we're going to see if we can spot any here and what the effect is. Um, so that's hard, bro. Yeah, it is. English is difficult. I grant you that. It is. Um, yeah. But the more you practice, the better. That's why it's useful to know how to score highly in questions, because then you can just begin ticking off skills rather than trying to focus on the most complex answer ever. So let's break this up. Come on, screen, don't let me down. So we'll break it down. Let's do the first paragraph. And whilst I do that, I want to see in the chat, can you notice any structural devices? The sun was warming the brush house, breaking through its crevices in long streaks. And one of the streaks fell on the hanging bed box where baby Kiatito laid, and on the ropes that held it. It was a tiny movement that drew their eyes to the hanging box. Kino and Joanna froze in their positions. Down the rope that hung the baby's box from the roof support, a scorpion moved slowly. His stinging tail was straight out behind him, but he could whip it up in a flash of time. Okay, so has anyone noticed any structural devices? What I might do is cut this down a little bit and do it section by section. Has anyone noticed any structural devices off the bat? Let's see. Metaphor is language, not structure. So be careful not to fall into that trap. We're looking for structure, not language. But a metaphor is in there if we were thinking about language. Okay, I'll show you. This is what I said. Firstly, the first thing that I would do in approaching this. Why is my pen not working? The first thing that I would do in approaching this is think about what's being talked about. What is the focus of this paragraph? Actually says shift in focus. Absolutely right. There is definitely a shift in focus here. Right. So thinking about the focus of this paragraph. Firstly, it opens by talking about the sun going through the window and hitting the hanging box and the baby Kyoto. So the focus there is on the light, is on the sunlight coming through the windows as it hits the baby and the what's it called, the hanging box. Now, what's the effect of this on the reader? Personally, to me, that's quite a peaceful atmosphere that's created, because it's just a bit of nice imagery, isn't it? But as Ashley said, there is a change in focus, meaning that our focus as a reader changes. So it was on the light. I would say the focus changes about there. We go from talking about the light and the streaks on the hanging box to a very short, simple sentence. I should really get my change this. It was a tiny movement that drew their eyes to the hanging box. To me, that short, simple sentence signifies a change in focus to me. So what is the effect of that on the reader? If we're thinking about why is this interesting and we're directly answering the question, well, to me, that is, if you think back, in media res. Does anyone remember what in media res is? Has anyone been revising? So a shift in focus is quite literally as it sounds. If the writer was talking about one thing and then the next line's talking about something else. Anyone remember what in media res is? In media res roughly translates to in the middle of action, which is interesting to a reader because it kind of sets you off a lack of balance. As a reader, if you're put into a situation where there's loads of conflict right at the beginning of a story, you're going to feel a little bit disorientated. You're going to feel a little bit thrown off balance a little bit. So to me, that's why it's interesting because you're almost having to catch up to the writing. And so you're kind of placed in the action itself. So I'll put a reader in the action, in the action. So that's why it's interesting. And we know that because of the short, simple sentences. Completely changes the pace. So I put fast pace as well is a good language, sorry, not language, structural device. The pacing. Now it says Kino and Joanna froze in their positions. Down the rope that hung the baby's box from the roof support, a scorpion moved slowly. His stinging tail was straight out behind him, but he could whip it up in a flash of time. So yes, juxtaposition is a nice structural technique. So I think in this first paragraph, the main thing to focus on is that shift in focus. It begins by talking about the light through the windows, hitting the baby and hitting the hanging box, and then it changes quite rapidly to the focus being now on the scorpion, about danger. So there's been a complete focus shift, and it's now on the danger. So the atmosphere has completely changed. It began as quite peaceful, and then it changes to something quite disorientating, quite threatening. So I put threat as well. So as a reader, you're intrigued because you're thinking, "Oh my gosh, what's happening? I'm having to catch up. Like, are the characters being going to be okay?" So it begins to be quite disorientating. Um, well, where is their juxtaposition? Because I think you're absolutely right. There is juxtaposition. And I think it's here between the peace and the danger. I write it here in blue, juxtaposition. There is a contrast between the beginning. So it goes from calm, sun to like danger and the scorpion, which very much so contrast each other. Absolutely right. So that's what I would focus on in that first paragraph. That the focus changes, and so as a reader, you're thrown off balance, the pacing changes. And another thing to mention is the types of sentences used. When it's talking about the sun going through the windows, the sentences are quite complex um, in structure. But that is juxtaposed to these really simple sentences. It was a tiny movement that drew their eyes to the box. Keen and Joanna froze in their positions. We've got short, simple sentences which contrast to the complex ones. Contrast to previous complex. So as a the effect on the reader, why is that interesting? Because it's changing the pace. It's changing it's bringing you to make you feel disorientated. By having that very sudden change, you're thrown into chaos. And so you're kind of left to fend for yourself in fight or flight. So I'll put chaos. So that's what I would put for that first paragraph. Let's see what's being said. Sorry. You said you just guessed, but you were correct though. It was really good. Um, you just get it with age. I didn't used to be so good at English. Practice. Practice makes perfect. Okay, right. Splitting up the next bit then. Before we even go on to analyze the next bit, what do you notice about the length of the paragraphs between the first one and the second one? What do you notice here structurally? Anyone notice anything? Longer. Yeah, it's absolutely longer. And it's like that for a reason. Paragraph length is a structural technique. So let's read it through. And as always, if you see anything that you think is a good structural technique or might explain why it's interesting, um, please say so. So it says, Kino's breath whistled in his nostrils, and he opened his mouth to stop it. And then the startled look was gone from him, and the rigidity from his body. In his mind, a new song had come, the song of evil, the music of the enemy, a very foe of the family, a savage, secret, dangerous melody, and underneath the song of the family cried plaintively. The scorpion moved delicately down the rope towards the box. Kino was in motion. His body glided quietly across the room, noiselessly and smoothly. His hands were in front of him, palms down, and his eyes were on the scorpion. It sensed danger when Kino was almost within reach of it. It stopped, and its tail rose up over its back in little jerks, and the curved thorn of the tail's end glistened. Kino stood perfectly still. He could not move until the scorpion moved, and it felt for the source of the death that it was coming to it. Kino's hand went forward very slowly, very smoothly. The thorned tail jerked upright. Okay. Um, how would you practice English? Past papers. Past papers. Purely the way to go. Um, yeah, past papers. If you ever wanted to send something in, the one that you wanted marking, I'm more than happy to do it. So order of events, pace, focus, all of these are in this somewhere. So let's start with the focus. Let me shift the color on this one. Let's do some yellow. What is the focus of this paragraph? What is the paragraph about? Any ideas? Kino. Yes, actually, I did. I haven't marked it. Sorry. I've been somewhat busy. Sorry. I will get to it this week. Um, focus. Yeah, focus is on Kino, and not just Kino, but the Scorpion and the Scorpion. It's what do you think is interesting about this dynamic between the two characters, about Kino and the Scorpion? It's almost like they're against each other. Like it's become a little bit of a battle almost. So I would say, like, notice here the focus consistently changes. I'll do it in two different colors so that it's clear. How do I change this to the tool? Let me add a highlight in. I will do it in blue and purple to show you what I mean. So I put the scorpion in blue. The scorpion moved delicately down the rope towards the box. Kino was in motion. His body glided quietly across the room, noiselessly and smoothly. His hands were in front of him, palms down, and his eyes were on the scorpion. It sensed danger when Kino was almost within its reach of it. It stopped, and its tail rose over the back of little jerks. Kino stood perfectly still. He could not move until the scorpion moved, and it felt. Oops, no. Could not move until the scorpion moved. And it felt for the source of the death that was coming to it. Kino's hand went forward very slowly, very smoothly. The thorn tail jerked up upright. Okay, I've highlighted in blue the bits that were about the scorpion, and in purple the bits that were about Kino. Um, what do you notice about the focus of this paragraph? Any interesting observations anyone wants to make? Any ideas? No wrong answers? Okay, I'll say what I came up with. I think that's a really interesting structure because I changed to purple for this one. Notice here that the focus isn't just on one character. The focus constantly shifts between each of the characters. Shifts, I put back and forth between the two characters, between the Scorpio and Kino, between Kino and Scorpion. It's not just on one of them, it shifts. Remember not last week, but the week before, when I showed you a change in focus? If you're watching a TV show, for example, the camera doesn't just stay on one position the entire time, it changes so that the audience sees a different thing. That's what this is. Kind of imagine this like in blue, the camera is on the scorpion. When it's purple, the camera is on Kino. Blue, the Scorpion, and the cameraman is just like putting in a shift back and forth between the two characters. That's what this is like, and it's there for a reason. It's creating that tension by constantly shifting between these two characters. It's setting up almost like an antagonistic battle, almost like main character versus villain. There's this like fight setup, this battle almost. It's presenting this exchange as being a fight or a battle. And that's kind of emphasized by the bringing up of the Song of Evil as well, that Kino views this as a fight or a battle, which I think is very interesting, um, because it generates suspense and tension because you don't know who's going to win. And so for the characters, you kind of feel quite fearful and uneasy for our characters, quite unsettled as a reader, because of that suspense and tension. Um, and also, you've got very contrasting movements as well. Notice when it says Kino was in motion. Now, when the scorpion moves, its tail rose up in little jerks. Kino's response is to stand still. So you've got contrasting choices in movement. When one moves, the other stands still. So that adds to our tension because you don't know who's going to win this battle. So you've got like contrasting movements as well. And it's also worth saying that this paragraph is very heavy on physicality as well. You've got um, the in motion, the body gliding, the hands in front of him, the scorpion's tail jerking and curving. Here, kind of standing perfectly still. It's very heavy on tactile imagery. So I'll put, oops, paragraph heavy. I put heavily focused actually. So we get our keywords in. Heavily focused on movement. Yeah, it's very interesting because it's clearly setting up this battle between the Scorpion and Kino. But there's also some other structural devices in here that you could pick out. Has anyone noticed anything else? When you're thinking about structure, you should always be thinking about who is speaking, narration style. What is the narration style of this particular extract? Does anyone know? Is it first person? Is it third person? Does anyone have any inkling? Anyone have any ideas? I'll tell you if not, it's third person. And we've looked at narration before. Specifically, it's third person limited, meaning that it's still focused on a singular character. And that's really interesting because we tend to use this kind of narration if we're thinking about the effect on the reader as being quite immersive. So, as a reader, you get to see the whole scene play out, but you are focused on one character. So, you do begin to care for the main character. So, you begin to care for Kino or Kaino. And as a result, you do worry for him. So as a reader, you're kind of left to feel unsettled because you're unsure about whether he's going to win this battle with the Scorpion. So you're left on the edge of your seat. You're feeling interested. Sorry, let's see what's been said in the chat. So first person is when it's like I or me. Third person is they or he or she. So this is third person because it's him or Kainos. He opened it, and then in his mind. So this is third person because it's not from Kino's perspective. It's from a narrator's perspective, like a fly on the wall, watching all of this unfold. Um, I would argue this is also kind of like a stream of consciousness as well. This whole thing is basically Kino's perspective. Um, he talks about the Song of Evil quite a little bit. There's definitely a stream of consciousness in there. Stream of consciousness. Yeah, there's a stream of consciousness. Like the Song of Evil. Song of Evil. The Fiend of Foe of the Family, whatever it says. Um, this is interesting because it gives you an insight. It gives the reader an insight into Kaino's internal thoughts. Kaino's, oops, pen glitched on me. Kaino's internal thoughts, which is interesting because you're getting to see how he thinks and how he feels. And as I said, you care for him. So you've got this like inner emotion coming out. So you get to see those internal thoughts. You begin to get connected to this character. Um, the pacing as well. Kino's breath whistled in his nostrils, and then he started to look, was gone from him. The whole paragraph is relatively slow in pacing, intermingled with some relatively short, simple sentences. Most of it is quite complex, therefore quite slow in the pace, but it is intermingled with those shorter paragraphs. So I put most of this paragraph, I put para, is made of long, complex sentences that slow the pace quite dramatically. Why do you think the writer's chosen to slow the pace of this paragraph? Why do you think the writer has done it quite slowly, even though it's like a battle? Any ideas? Yeah, see what's going on. And no ideas? Um, so Sure. So basically, the slow pacing is what keeps you invested. The slow pacing is um is the thing that causes tension and suspense because you're almost being held on the edge of your seat. You're not being taken along with the journey quickly. You're finding details out as they're being unveiled to you. So it creates tension because it's anticipation. It's probably a better word. I'm going to highlight the word anticipation because you're waiting for something to happen. You're unsure of the outcome, and so you'll become very invested in this argument. And it is intermingled with short sentences that puts focus on those short sentences. Um, so I'll put the short sentences show you the change in thoughts. Show a change in thoughts. So it's dramatic. It's being said. Second person is you. So anything is like you, basically, if you're talking to another person. Okay. Let me see if I've missed anything in here. Go up. There is repetition in there as well. Let me highlight it in different color. There's repetition of like freezing and standing still. I can't remember where it was. He stood perfectly still. It's just freezing somewhere. I can't remember where it was. Oh, guys, can use scorpion. It's in danger. It stops. Where does its tail? He could not move. Yeah, there's like imagery. There's repeated imagery of the frozen still. Um, maybe it's onto the next bit as well. But yeah, oh, the rigidity of his body. That was one. Yeah, the startle look was gone from him. The rigidity of his body. Um, Yes, you get this repeated imagery of him like freezing. Why do you think that is? Any ideas why the writer repeats this idea of the fact that Kino is like stood still? So you got a repeated idea of stillness. This is a battle. When you experience something scary and new, you might go into fight or flight response. And one of the fight or flight responses is to stand still. It's freezing. So this is telling us how scared he is. It's emphasizing the fear that he feels. Emphasizes the fear to the physical danger. You know, he could get stung by the scorpion and die. So he's very fearful and we experience that. It's emphasizing the severity of the situation. Severity of situation. It's literally life or death for Kino. If he gets stung, he's going to die. So it's life or death. It's important. So therefore, as a character, we feel for him. Um, I guess you could also argue, this is the final thing before I move on to the next bit, is that there is also potentially fragmentation in there as well. We've not got any of the physical dashes that you tend to see with fragmentation, but you do have the stop-start nature. So the kind of, I guess I'll put like alternating focus shifts and contrasting sentences. So the complex to simple, complex to simple, kind of presents this like stop-start nature of the narrative, um, which I think you could argue represents the sort of like or creates a very unstable pace. That creates unstable pace, which mirrors the chaos. I put which mirrors chaos of the situation. So therefore, as a reader, you're going to feel unsettled and nervous. Misha, I have received it. Sorry again. As I said to Ashley, I've just been like incredibly busy. I printed it out. It's right here next to me. And I'm gonna do that tomorrow before our session. So I will get it done, I promise. Yeah. Okay, right. I've marked your other one as well, by the way, and I need to send that back to you. I just don't work. I haven't worked for a few days, so it's just been like but I will get that back to you. Okay, so and moving on to the next bit then, quickly. We'll do 10 more minutes and then I'll let you go. Might not get through all of this, but I hope in some way this is helping you begin to pick out bits. So we'll do this little bit. So we've got him fighting the scorpion. He's approaching the scorpion on the rope. Next, it says, and at that moment, the laughing Coyotito shook the rope and the scorpion fell. Now, I want to highlight this because what do you notice about the length of that paragraph? Any ideas? What do you notice about the length of that paragraph? I will tell you. It is a single sentence paragraph, a very short paragraph, in other words. Now, that is there for a reason, a single sentence paragraph. And the reason being putting focus on something. It emphasizes the focus of that sentence. The focus being on the falling scorpion. Now, it's isolated, pardon me, it's isolated that sentence for a reason. Why do you think the writer has chosen to isolate that moment of the scorpion falling? Why is that interesting for a reader? Any ideas? I will tell you. It's shocking, purely because it's shocking. It creates tension and shock. And shock. It's a really, really sudden thing. Before that, in this previous paragraph, we had a really, really long paragraph focused on this battle between the Scorpion and Kino, all for it to end very, very suddenly, very shockingly, with the Scorpion falling. So, as a reader, you're going to respond to that very sudden change of events. Um, Almost feel quite horrified by this sort of event. Um, by separating it, it mirrors the shocking nature of that event. Almost like everything that happened before no longer matters. Um, and all that matters is what's happening right now. You get this rapid pace, this rapid shift to a fast pace. to fast pace because it should shock you. It should make you feel unsettled. It should mirror the chaos and the panic that Kino feels. That his son is a scorpion on him. So you should feel haunted by that moment. Um, yeah, the contrast as well. Notice that like, you've got a laughing baby and then a scorpion falls on him. That contrast there is haunting, highlighting the innocence of that baby and how bad the situation is. You've got a poisonous scorpion on a baby's face that could kill him. So it's highlighting the stakes. Oops. So the contrast highlights the stakes. Contrast highlights stakes. Oops, got it the wrong way around. Highlights the stakes of the situation, how serious it is. Okay, then we've also got, um, again, I would argue, some fragmented structure. Um, if we look in this section here, it says Kino's hands. Um, oops, I didn't mean to do that. I shifted everything. Kino's hand leaped to catch it, but it fell past his fingers, fell on the baby's shoulders, landed and struck. Then snarling, Kino had it in his fingers, rubbing it to a paste in his hands. He threw it down and beat it into the earth floor with his fist, and Kiatito screamed with pain in his box. But Kino beat and stamped the enemy until it was only a fragment and a moist place in the dirt. His teeth were bared and fury flared, and in his eyes, and the song of the enemy roared in his eyes. So, here, I think we've got again some fragmented pacing. We've got like I've got fragmented structure. We've got like a contrast between short, simple sentences and complex, longer sentences, almost kind of creating this panic and chaos. So I put fragmentation, mirrors panic and chaos. I told you in the past that we tend to only use fragmentation to symbolize characters' changing thoughts. And it tends to be like panic and chaos that you tend to find fragmentation. Okay. Um, this might have to be our last paragraph, by the way. Notice as well the repetition. We changed to red. We've got Kino's hand leaped to catch it, but it fell past his fingers, fell on the baby's head, landed and struck. We've got fell up here. So we've got a repetition 3 times of the word fell. The reason this is to reinforce almost the like dread of the situation. That the poisonous scorpion has fallen on the head of a baby child who could now die. So it sort of reinforces almost like the inevitability of it, or especially the dread and panic of the situation, the severity, I'll put, how serious it is, the stakes. So as a reader, you care a lot because the stakes are really high. This is literally life or death. I'm trying to think if there's anything else in here. What is the focus of this paragraph? I think the focus is now no longer on the battle, it's on Kino winning. He squishes the scorpion, he like molds it and kills it. So I put Kino kills the scorpion. That's what the focus is on. So very, very interesting. Um, as well, what is even more interesting is that the focus is on the killing of the scorpion. But in the midst of all of the killing, you've got this one clause here, and Kiyoshito screamed with pain in his box. So before that clause, it talks about how Kino had it in his fingers, he rubbed it to a paste, he beat it on the floor. Kiyotito screams. Then Kino beats it and stamps it even further. The focus is on Kino here. It's on the violence. Um, so I put violence. But in the midst of all of this violence, you've got a solitary cry of a baby. And even though the baby cries, Kino, his dad, doesn't go to the baby. He continues beating down this scorpion to kill it. And I think that's quite symbolic because amidst all of the chaos, you've got this singular clause dedicated to the child. Clause of crying. So you have this very brief, and I say very brief, change in focus. Change in focus. From the killing of the scorpion to the child to the killing of the scorpion. So it changes ever so briefly to the child, then back to the killing, which is very interesting because I guess what it does is that it shows us or reminds the reader of the danger. It like reminds us of the danger of the situation, um, and shows us the kind of character that Kino is. You know, he's got all this rage. He's just like bashing out a scorpion, um, and yet the child is not his priority. The focus is on the killing of the scorpion. Um, Yeah, and so as a reader, the effect is that we feel that same rage. That same rage. We get reminded of the consequence. The writer reminds us that the child exists in the background. Reminds us that Scorpion has bitten, or not bitten, stung this child. And so, as a reader, we begin to feel that same rage because are reminded of why it's necessary to kill the scorpion in the first place. Um, yeah, and he begins to feel this uncontrollable rage as well. Okay. Trying to think if there's anything else. No, I think that's what we might have time for today. Yes. Um, yeah, we won't got time for that. Now, I have actually made notes on this specific extract. So what I will do is I'll add them to our English slide, wherever all the slides are, and I will let you read through this yourself. But that's how I would begin to tackle this. Now, obviously, in an exam, you get a lot less time than that. But notice just in my short time, I've picked up changes in focus. I thought about the pacing. I thought about the sentence types, the contrasting, the in media res, the juxtaposition. I thought about the focus shifting again, the paragraph length, the stream of consciousness, the tension, short sentences, repetition, fragmentation. All of this just in a very short time. Now, my tips for you is I'd always be thinking about focus. What is the paragraph talking about, and does it ever change? That should be the main bulk of your writing. But if you see any of the other techniques, talk about them. Absolutely. Next Monday, then, I'm gonna move on to language for a little bit. I'm not going to spend as much time on language as we have on structure, because I think structure was something that's more complicated. And we're going to move on to language. And then shortly after, we'll do some AO3. Yeah. Yeah. So thank you all for coming. Again, I appreciate it. I'll stay around for a couple of minutes in case anyone has any questions, but otherwise, have a really nice week off. Take a break. You deserve it. Year 11's, whoo, is getting close to that time now, so I'd recommend starting to revise if you haven't already. Yeah, but good luck. Take this well-deserved break. You deserve it. Have a nice week, guys. Okay, how should year 9 start prepping for GCSEs, or should they not start now? Now, year 9 is relatively early, but it is always better to get ahead if that's what you want. Like if you're aiming for those really high grades, it is good to just get ahead now. A lot of schools start teaching GCSEs in year 9 anyway, or at least mine did. So in terms of English, what I would say is getting ahead of techniques. So when it comes to language and structure, for example, getting ahead of knowing all the techniques so that by the time you come to your GCSEs, it'll all be revision to you. You'll get much better at just being able to pick techniques out of text. Because I feel like a lot of my year 11s now struggle with that skill particularly. They're not able to recognize when a writer has used certain techniques. And that is kind of the basics of analysis. Um, so I would start with there. I'd start with all the terminology and just revising it, going over it. And AO1. I don't know if you've been here for my AO1 talks as well. AO1's the simplest skill, but it's 10% of your exam. So if you can smash AO1 now, then you can leave it later down the line. It'll all be second nature to you. That's what I would recommend. So past papers, getting terminology, quizzes, quizzing yourself for the next year or so, terminology. Okay. Anybody else? Any more questions? Let's see who's online still. Okay, right. Thank you for coming as always, guys. Have a lovely week. It said how to study English. Sorry, I just seen that. How to study English. Um, like I just said, because you said your GCSEs are 2028, so that'll be your year nine, right? So similar thing, similar thing. If it's language, getting ahead. So I don't know if you how much of it you've been with me for. I started a few months ago looking at assessment objective one, and that's the easiest English skill. It's about comprehension, which means picking things out of texts, usually quotes or just very basic facts. I would start there. Um, yeah, I would start with AO1 because it's good just to practice reading and being able to pick out factual bits of information from texts, boosting your vocabulary. So the best thing you can do is read. It is. It just is. I know a lot of people don't necessarily enjoy reading, or at least I didn't when I was your age. But it really is the best thing for you for studying English. And just practicing comprehension. So finding online past comprehension questions and just practicing those because that is the very basic skill of English. And then building on to terminology, so all the language and structural devices. Yeah, I would definitely start with assessment objective one. So look up comprehension. I'll write it down for you. Look, we do it in blue. Oops, my pen did not stay stable. So yeah, look for like comprehension questions, um, basically. Because all those are basically just like picking out facts from a text from a text. So if you can do that, then you can build from there. It's probably the easiest skill. Get formula sheets for GCSE. In what subject? If you're talking about sciences, um, then like yes. Yeah. In English, you never get any sort of sheets. So yeah. Maths you will do, yes. But normally it's the more complex equations. Why don't you get a sheet for English? Because there's nothing really like, yeah, there's because they're mean in exams, you're expected to know techniques off the top of your head. So they don't tend to give you a sheet for English, like they do for other subjects. Right. Okay then. Um, yeah. I will let you go because it is very late. But thank you for coming as always. Why do I need to know languages? Because English is great. English isn't just about the language, it's about reading. It's about emotion. This is the thing people get wrong about English. It's not about language. It's not about knowing how to speak English. It's about understanding emotion. It's about talking to the people. A lot of English is literally about how you feel, how it makes you think. English encourages deeper thoughts about the world. And I think as you grow older as a person, it's a very, very, very vital skill to have in life. It's not about the language, it's about understanding. And it's about being able to interpret things in life. Like the meaning of life is way beyond um things like maths and science. English is really where it's at. It's about deeper thinking, and it's such a beautiful thing. And you'll appreciate that when you get older. Trust me, you will. Right. Okay.